Let's return now to today's election day in the U.S. because the issue of immigration has been front and center of the campaign. Donald Trump promises mass deportation, while Kamala Harris pledges increased border security and legal pathways for migrants. Now, tens of thousands of migrants from all across the globe are waiting to see the outcome of this election. Andalucia Quesolof reports from Mexico City.
Daniel Lanet is a welder from Venezuela. He arrived in Mexico City last year to this shelter. On his way north, he was attacked while crossing the treacherous Darien Gap.
I had a gun to my head and I thought, oh well, this is what happens so that I can keep going.
They demanded money. Over 500,000 migrants crossed the Darien Gap in 2023. Perils include robbery, illness, sexual assault, and at worst, death. Here at Tochan Shelter in Mexico City, migrants are waiting for their appointments to request asylum in the United States. They are worried that depending on who wins the presidential elections, they may never get a chance to plead their case. Hatim Mohammed was born in Sudan and raised in Dubai. He migrated when he lost his job. He is awaiting his asylum request appointment that he made through the Customs and Border Patrol app. He says Donald Trump's racism makes things harder for him.
He's going to look at me as like the same category of people that he believes in his head that they should not be there.
Muhammad says he can't go back to Sudan and an ongoing war. Jonas Gregorio left Caracas 7 years ago. He fears that he would be killed if he returned to Venezuela.
On one hand, as Venezuelans, we want Trump to win because we think he would take down President Maduro. But as a migrant, it would be much better with Harris.
Gregorio helped install an altar for the traditional Mexican holiday, Day of the Dead, to honor migrants who died on their journey to the U.S.
If governments understood the cause behind the migration, harmful practices would disappear, preventing numerous deaths.
Gabriela trusts that U.S. citizens will choose the right candidate who will be more sensitive to migrants' needs. Andalucia Quesolof, TRT World, Mexico City.
And in Chile, South America, immigrants are also closely following the U.S. election. Michael Fox reports now from the capital of Santiago.
Jefferson Gil is from Venezuela. He came to Chile 2 years ago in search of work after living years in Colombia. He's watching the U.S. elections, and he says he likes Donald Trump's business mentality.
If Donald Trump wins, the United States will be great once again.
Despite Trump's promise of strengthening the border and cracking down on immigration, most Venezuelans here say they prefer him to Kamala Harris.
The average Venezuelan immigrant here prefers Trump because with Trump they see a greater chance of receiving specialized immigration status and the possibility of harsher U.S. policies against the Venezuelan government.
Venezuelans make up roughly a third of the 1.6 million immigrants in Chile today. There are also large numbers of Peruvians, Colombians, and Haitians. Most live here in the capital, Santiago. Haitian immigrants in Chile are nervous about Tuesday's election. Nearly 200,000 Haitians have migrated here over the last decade. But for many, Chile is just a stopover. The dream remains the United States.
If Donald Trump wins, some of them are afraid to get deported because you know that the government of Donald Trump always say that I'm going to deport all illegal people in the United States.
Those concerns are shared by many immigrants here. Others are unsure. Katiuska Cedeño moved from Venezuela to Chile 7 years ago, fleeing the country's financial crisis. She says whoever wins has to care about the immigrants.
Migrant rights need to be front and center in the United States and every country. It needs to be the priority.
Chile's migrants are split over who they want in the White House. But one thing is for sure. The vote will have an impact on people thousands of miles from the U.S. border. Michael Fox, TRT World, Santiago, Chile.
And Michael joins us now live from Santiago. Michael, really good to see you. We're, of course, keeping our eyes peeled to the polling stations in the U.S. For example, Donald Trump is about to go and vote any second now. But what about there in Chile? Are people following the news closely to see what happens?
Look, people are following the news closely. Now, it is different from what we see in Central America and Mexico. Those places are even closer to the United States, but still far away. Chile, it's on the opposite side of the continent, and yet people still following. People are worried and concerned about immigration, like we just saw in those reports. Venezuelans really want Donald Trump. Most other immigrants across the board are so much, and they would like to see Kamala Harris because they think it was going to help them with their situation. And then also, economically, foreign policy. We have a situation where the president, Boric, would, of course, like to see a Kamala victory. They're kind of aligned politically. And then Cast, who came in second place in the last elections here in Chile, he's far right. He's a Trump supporter. And so, of course, he would love to see Trump come into office as well.
But do they know about the policies of Kamala and Kamala Harris and Donald Trump? I mean, do they know exactly what's going to happen depending on who wins?
No, I mean, look, your average immigrant on the ground doesn't know the details. But of course, he or she knows Trump, and Trump was in office and saw what happened at the border, right? And of course, there's a lot of people speaking amongst each other. There's a lot of immigrants who are saying, oh, well, who do you think is best? Who do you think would be better? The Venezuelans overall, so many people I've spoken to just in the last couple of days, have been very united in the sense that Trump is going to be adamant against President Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela. And then that, of course, helps their cause of removing Maduro from power. Most people who have emigrated to, left Venezuela and come to Chile would love to see Maduro out of power there. And so obviously that's what's playing out for the Venezuelans. And on the other immigrants, they're just basically saying what is going to be easier, what is going to be better for us at the border, who's going to not build a border wall, who's going to continue the policies of Biden. They don't know the ins and outs, but they know the images of each person.
Michael, as we're talking, we're just looking at live pictures coming to us from Florida. This is the former President Donald Trump, who's there voting now. The connection is a bit spotty. That's why we can't really see those pictures really good right now. But Donald Trump and his wife are now voting at this second. But, because I want to ask you, one thing is, of course, immigrants wanting to travel to the U.S., but another thing is leaders in South America and sort of the relationship between the U.S. and those countries. Will that also be different depending on who wins the White House?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very, very different. And what's really important to remember, and I've been doing a lot of reporting on this lately, is the far right, the Latin American far right, is very much hoping for a Trump victory here. Because, and I was at CPAC Brazil. It's a conference, a conservative conference in Brazil in July. At that conference, so many people I spoke with, and we're talking about Latin American leaders from the far right, including Bolsonaro, former President Bolsonaro in Brazil, Javier Milei in Argentina is very much a Trump ally, members of Bukele's government in El Salvador. These are all people that really want the wind in their sails from a Trump victory. And that's what we saw. Remember when Trump won last time, it was 2 years later that Bolsonaro won. And many people believe that Bolsonaro would not have won if Trump hadn't won the office in the United States. So the image and the inspiration that Trump gives to right-wing and far-right Latin American leaders is huge, and it's across the board. And at the same time, most of the more left or center-left or Democratic leaders that we see across the region, of course, want a Kamala Harris, even if it means that the U.S. is going to continue with wars and whatever else abroad. It does not carry with it the image of actually trying to degrade or destroy the country's democracy, which is so at stake right now in the United States and somewhere else around the region.
Michael, again, as we're talking, this is Donald Trump as well now voting at his local constituency in Florida. We're looking at Donald Trump with that iconic red cap, Make America Great Again cap, together with his wife, Melania Trump. Unfortunately, we can't hear what he's saying at the moment, but, you're talking about sort of these issues, the key issues that Donald Trump has been putting forward during this campaign. He wants to be very tough on the border issue, but if it turns out to be Kamala Harris that wins, do you think that more people from South America are going to try to start making their way towards the U.S.? Is that sort of a signal to immigrants to say, yes, go ahead and try to make their way up north towards the U.S. border?
I don't think it's a signal because of what Kamala Harris represents as kind of the continuity of the Biden administration. So it's kind of more of what we've seen is what I think immigrants have in their heads, and from people I've been speaking with, Kamala Harris is going to be a continuity of what we've seen so far. So we won't see kind of massive new waves of people going to the border. What we did see right before the last Trump administration was a massive wave of people trying to rush to the border before Trump came into office. So it's interesting that what we might actually see, depending on who wins, if Trump wins, we might see in the next couple of months kind of a big wave of migrants, not necessarily from South America, because it's so far, it's such a long way to get to the U.S. from South America. But I could imagine people from Central America and Mexico saying, you know, now it's now or never. Like, we're going to make a run for it. That's what we saw last time. So it is interesting that that might be the dichotomy we'll see about, but we won't see necessarily. I don't think Kamala Harris is going to mean a lessening of the border security from what we've had up until now. It's just that the image of Trump is, I'm going to deport everybody, and I'm going to really shore up the border ever more than before. And on that note, migrants in South America, migrants in Central America, and definitely Mexico are definitely watching.
For sure. And what we're watching right now is, of course, the former president, Donald Trump. He is taking questions from reporters, from people there at his local polling station in Florida. He is going to be casting his vote. Probably not a big surprise who he's going to be voting for. But we've also seen his vice president, J.D. Vance, his VP candidate. He cast his vote earlier up in Ohio. But these are live pictures from Florida of Donald Trump about to cast his ballot. Michael Fox, thank you so much for joining us there live from Santiago with the view from people down in South America. Now, Washington, D.C. is also on high alert as the election day is underway. Protective fencing has been put up around the White House and other key buildings in that city. There's also a very heavy police presence on the street. Now, our reporter Leonie Lacani, she was out on the street looking at the preparations in the Capitol before voting started.
Election Eve in Washington, D.C., and some businesses are taking security into their own hands, choosing to board up their windows in case there are any disruptions in the city on Election Day and the days following.
The chief of police says there's no need for alarm right now, but is asking everyone to remain vigilant.
At the White House, there's fencing around the entire perimeter, but it's been in place for weeks now. The park outside the White House is still open, but that's likely to close from Election Day.
Now, these are just precautions, although we are expecting to see more of a police presence Election Day onwards. And the police chief says they won't stand for any kind of disruption or unlawful behavior.
Further in, there's a stage being built. That's for the inauguration parade that takes place in January. Right in front of the White House is BLM Plaza, or Black Lives Matter Plaza. In 2020, this was the site of numerous protests and rallies in the months leading up to the election.
This time, it's pretty calm here. The main difference is that in 2020, Donald Trump was the incumbent president. He was in the White House. It was a divisive presidency, and there was a need for more security.
This year, Donald Trump is in Florida. Kamala Harris will be in Washington on election night. But security around her is tight anyway, since she's the vice president.
The concern, however, is what happens after the voting ends, with Trump vowing to challenge election results if he doesn't win. Leonie Lacani, TRT World, Washington.
Now let's bring in our John Brain, who joins us live from Florida. John, we're just looking at live pictures of the former president, Donald Trump. He is there now out casting his vote. We can't really hear what he's saying, but he's for sure taking questions from reporters there. It seems like probably not a big surprise who he's going to be voting for, right?
No, no surprise at all. I would have thought not that his vote will make any difference in Florida, which is now a solidly Republican state. It was, until a few years ago, a crucial swing state. But when Trump won it in 2016, he knew that he'd won the election, a surprise victory at that time. He's casting his vote after an arduous day on the campaign trail yesterday, in which he started at 9 a.m. local time and carried on until 2 a.m. local time this morning. 4 different locations, 3 swing states. As one of his people said, he left it all on the field, American football expression. We've been hearing a little what he said as he went in to cast his vote, basically replaying the last election, still going on about his feelings that it was corrupt, that it was stolen. He says the system is wrong. He says that all Americans should be voting on the day, and it should be just paper votes, not the machines, which he's been so critical of. He claims those machines switched votes from Biden to him in 2020. So he'll be casting his vote. He'll then be going back to Mar-a-Lago to rest up. And then later in the evening, he'll be heading for the convention center here in West Palm Beach, where the Trump headquarters will be based, where they'll have their watch party as they see the night unfold.
John, does it seem like he's sort of laying the groundwork here for a possible challenge to the outcome of this election in case Kamala comes out on top?
Oh, absolutely. The Republicans are lawyered up to the max. They've appointed literally hundreds of lawyers ready to make challenges where necessary. Trump's overall message is, I'm going to win this election. If I don't win it, it means it's been stolen from me, the same as it was in 2020. So yes, he is preparing the groundwork. He's been particularly making comments about the way the system operates in Pennsylvania, suggests that his pollsters believe that Pennsylvania is perhaps not going his way. We don't know for sure, of course. But yes, Trump very much preparing the ground. He's not someone, as we know, who can accept defeat. Very unlikely to accept it again this time if he loses. But the message from his camp here is they believe he is on course for victory.
We're just going to have to wait and see. That's John Brain live for us from Florida. Thank you so much for that report, John. And you've been looking at live pictures of the former President Donald Trump as he is out now casting his vote in Florida. Of course, Kamala Harris has already sent in her vote as a mail-in vote. We've seen the vice president candidate, J.D. Vance, also casting his vote earlier today in Ohio. Stay with us here on TRT World. A lot more coming up.